Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Brice Lewis, and today we're going to talk about all things NFL. We're going to talk about the wild card games. We're going to give you some news and notes coming out of all those games. We're also going to talk about my predictions on those games coming up this weekend, who I think is going to win, who I think is going to be successful. Also, we're going to talk about some college football, some of the results from the New Year's 6 games, and also we're going to talk about the national championship preview between Clemson and Alabama. Not Alabama. Clemson and LSU. You're so used to Alabama being in there, you say Alabama, but Clemson and LSU. LSU is the big dogs in the SEC this year and the big dogs in the college football playoff this year in general after destroying Oklahoma. But coming into it, we're going to kick off with the wild card for the NFL. We're going to talk about all 4 games here, starting with the Tennessee Titans and the New England Patriots. To me, this is one of the most interesting games of the entire weekend because this game has a lot riding on it. This game in general, a lot of people are wondering if this is the end of the Bill Belichick dynasty in New England, if New England's fallen off a bridge, if New England is done for, if New England isn't the same team anymore. And this game this week's going to prove a lot and show a lot because, New England needs this game. They need to come out in this game and compete at a high level. They need to win this game, and they need to do everything they can to just be the best team they can potentially be. Because if they lose this game, there's going to be a lot of doubts about this team going into next year. You don't know if Brady's going to leave because Brady has the ability to opt out of his contract after this year. Then also on top of that, you don't know how with Bill Belichick. The defense is straight for a couple of years, but what's the offense going to do? You lose Brady. What's their emergency quarterback? It's not like they've had time to groom a guy. I mean, is Jarrett Stidham going to potentially be the guy? There's just a lot of questions, and so maybe that lingers over the franchise of just what's going to happen if potentially Tom Brady left and they lose this Tennessee Titans. For Tennessee's coming to this game free, loose. They've finished 9-7, I believe, for the last 4 years. And they're a very well-coached football team, and they can score points. Ryan Tannehill has gave this team a resurgence ever since replacing Marcus Mariota this year. And, Derrick Henry is a beast at running back. He is one of the best running backs in the league, and in the last game of the season won the rushing title because of that. And you have A.J. Brown, a rookie wide receiver who's came out and played superb, he's played fabulous, and he's played at a very, very high level. And he's a guy that definitely you need to watch out for this weekend because, he's kind of built like DJ Metcalf. They're both from Ole Miss. Very strong, physical, big receiver. He looks like he's bigger than most corners. He should be able to overpower most corners. And then obviously they have some other weapons too on the Titans offense. Now obviously back end of the Titans defense would be my concern, but they have a good front seven and they really could give the Patriots some problems. Do not be surprised if the Titans come into this week to this wild card game and beat the New England Patriots. I would not be shocked at all if that happened this weekend. And that would definitely cause some shockwaves going through New England and Boston areas. As fans would probably be like, well, what's going to happen now? We've been on top of the world for so long, and now we're not where we've always been. Next game we're going to break down for you, is the Vikings and the Saints. This is a rematch of the Miracle, the Minnesota Miracle, a couple of years ago with Case Keenum when he threw it to Stephon Diggs. And on basically just a throw it up and hope you catch it play, Saints looked like they were about to win the game, and Stephon Diggs was able to catch it. 2 of the secondary players for the Saints ran into each other, and Minnesota scored a touchdown to win the game. So, and that's one of the very shocking and surprising ways the Saints have lost in the playoffs the last few years, and that one obviously stung with them, and that's already hung with them. So a lot of people are looking at this as maybe a revenge game. for what happened a couple of years ago. Coming into this game, the only thing that's really changed is that Dalvin Cook is in this game, which I have news on next segment, and also Kirk Cousins is the quarterback instead of Case Keenum. Kirk hasn't played in the greatest in primetime games or in big games, so this is going to, and it's I think you believe in his playoff appearances, he hasn't played the greatest either. So it's going to be important for him to be able to come into this game and play well, going against Drew Brees, a very seasoned quarterback, a guy who, he is known as one of the saviors of New Orleans, and they're coming in here with a high-powered offense with Michael Thomas, the best receiver this year in the NFL, breaking Marvin Harrison's all-time catches record. Alvin Kamara getting healthy, playing at a better level, and just Jared Cook playing on a high level, and just basically this whole offense is playing on a high level. And that Minnesota defense is good. That Minnesota defense is one of the things that can keep them in this game. That pass rush, that front four, is one of the best in football, and they're going to have to get pressure on Drew Brees if they want to stay in this game. And their secondary is going to have to hold up because Minnesota has had some issues in the secondary this year. But if they can hold it up against the Saints, I think they'll have a chance to potentially be able to come out with this game with a victory and upset the Saints in the Dome. And that's one reason why I understand why a lot of people go with the Saints this weekend, because also it's in New Orleans and they've had one of the best home field advantages, since Breeze has been there. And so you just don't see any reason why maybe this time around things would be different and things would change. So that's that game. Next game, we're going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks and the Philadelphia Eagles. This game is one of the most interesting games I think we've had in a while. Not because, these are two elite teams or something. It's just the stories of these games. Seattle's coming into this game. Remember 2 weeks ago against the Arizona Cardinals, they lost 2 running backs. So they had to sign 2 running backs off the street, but they didn't just sign any 2 running backs. They signed Robert Turbin and everybody's favorite and Seattle's favorite, Marshawn Lynch. And, he played his game last week. He played decent last week. He scored a touchdown. I mean, like I said, they're not expecting him to come in here and be this franchise running back like he was, but they're expecting him to still give him that beast mode mentality, that tough running and short yardage, and maybe have Travis Homer deal with third downs and receiving out of the backfield. So that's going to be mainly Marshawn's job, is just get the short yardage and do those things. And, obviously on the other side, Philadelphia, we already know people have talked about the story all year long about Carson Wentz and the injuries, and, running back injuries. Miles Sanders hurt, top receivers are down, top tight end is off, offensive linemen are going down, secondary has been suspect, and he's overcame all of it to lead them to 4 straight wins to get them into the playoffs. And it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, it's incredible. It's incredible that he was able to pull this off. It's incredible that he was able to do this and bring this to the city, because, a lot of people question Carson. A lot of people wonder if Carson was the guy because of what Nick Foles did when he brought them to the Super Bowl. But Carson was always the guy who was always the most talented out of the two of them, in my opinion. And you see what's happening with Nick Foles in Jacksonville. He's not even starting. I guess he'll start next year just because he has the money. But I can sit here and maybe tell you that Gardner Minshew has played better than Nick Foles. So, that's kind of that situation over there. So, it's just this is going to be a great game. This is in Philadelphia. A lot of people are kind of predicting Philadelphia to lose this game because of the fact they have so many injuries. And even though, yes, Seattle has injuries at running back, they're pretty much healthy everywhere else. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this game plays out and how this game goes in respect to the game plan Philadelphia has, who they get back for this game. And just remember, if they win this game, Deshaun Jackson could come back the next week. Rick Ward, Miles Sanders. They could play this week, but they might play for sure that next week. And Philadelphia could instantly go from the most hurt team in the playoffs to one of the most dangerous teams in the playoffs. And last game, the most under-talk-about game, because I think a lot of people look at this as the most unimportant game of the wild card weekend, the Bills and Texans. This game, I guess, doesn't have a lot of pizzazz in a lot of people's minds. There's not a lot of big storylines going into this game. It's just simply, Deshaun Watson, Josh Allen. That's your big matchup, quarterback matchup. The Bills, they're coming into the season ending it not on the greatest of notes, but, they're a very great defensive team with Travis White, one of the best corners in the NFL. And, you got, on the other side, Deshaun Watson with DeAndre Hopkins. So that's going to be a great matchup on the perimeter. And I think this game is just going to come down to who makes the most plays on offense. Houston is the better offensive team, but Buffalo is the better defensive team. So it's kind of strength versus strength here, where obviously the Bills' offense is the weakness, the Texans' defense is the weakness, so it's weakness versus weakness. But which weakness is not going to be the weakness that day? Bills can make some things happen because Josh Allen can do things with the legs, but same thing with the Texans. Texans can get a pass rush, especially if J.J. Watt, with the news of him coming back this week, which I'll talk about more in the next segment. And it'll be very interesting to see how this game goes. This game's going to come down just to who makes the right coaching decisions and who makes plays. And this is in Houston. Houston always has had great success in the playoffs, but if they want to change that narrative this year, they need to come out with a victory in this game right here. But coming up next, I'm going to give you more news and notes coming out of each of these games, just injury updates and things like that, just to give you more insight into all of these games coming up right here on the podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the breakdown of all 4 wildcard games this week and my opinions on each game, stories going into all those games, and potential, just what's being said and just other things like that about those 4 games. Now we're going to get into some news and notes about those games, just storylines heading into those games. The first storyline we're going to talk about in this, Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook has been hurt. He sat out the last 2 games of the season for the Minnesota Vikings. And this week he has been cleared to play, and he's going to start this week against the Saints, which is going to be very, very much needed against a tenacious Saints defense. I think Dalvin Cook coming back this week is big for the Vikings because they don't look the same without an effective running game. And Dalvin Cook can also break the game wide open. He is considerably one of the best running backs in the NFL today, and he's definitely going to open up a lot of things for the Vikings offense, which they pretty much need. They need that. They need all their guns blazing, because if you look at this weapons group with the Vikings, they look like one of the best in the league. You have one of the best duos in Thielen and Diggs, and then you got Dalvin Cook coming out of the backfield, Kyle Rudolph at tight end, and their offensive line is better than it has been the last couple of years. So you would think there's something here that the Vikings can work with and produce with the talent that they have. It's just all a matter of Kirk Cousins. If Kirk Cousins shows up, it makes the whole ship run. But if he doesn't, it's not. But Dalvin Cook can definitely help that. Dalvin Cook is definitely a key in this game to the success of the Minnesota Vikings in this game. And without him, you wouldn't look at the Vikings having much of a chance. I mean, you wouldn't. And so it's very important that they come out this game, establish a running game, and if they can, do some ball control and Dalvin Cook can make some big runs, they might be able to pull off the upset against the Saints and shock everybody in New Orleans in that dome and move on. And the Saints will not be denied their revenge from a couple of years ago. Another injury update. J.J. Watt has been activated this week. We talked about it last week, how J.J. Watt basically came to practice and now he's activated officially. And this is big for the Houston Texans. J.J. Watt is one of the best defensive ends in the league. Him and Whitney Merciless on those 2 ends will definitely cause Josh Allen some problems this weekend. This is more important because, there's been that debate, should they let him play, because could you be further risking J.J. Watt? But J.J. Watt knows if he doesn't play and they lose, he may feel like I could have maybe played and I may have been able to make a difference in the outcome. But at the same time, with the team he has, he may feel like, look, we have some guys, we have some talent. If I come back, maybe I can complete that puzzle. Maybe with me here, we can make that push, we can make that run. And I think if he really feels that way, it's something that you definitely have to consider if you're the Houston Texans and consider if you're J.J. Watt, which I think is why they made this decision, which is why I think they made the decision to go ahead and take him off injury reserve. Like, it was time for him to come back and at least give them something. Now, J.J. Watt might not be out there playing full 80 whatever snaps in the game, but him being out there for half the time is still better than him being there none of the time. And this is big for, just like I said, Houston, just to improve that pass rush. Because, Buffalo, their offensive line is actually pretty solid. It's not a bad offensive line. And Josh Allen is a mobile quarterback. But when you got those two book ends that can close the pocket on him and reduce his space as long as they play their gaps well, they might be able to give Josh Allen a lot of hecticness all day in the pocket. And also, you got to think, Houston's number 4 seed. If they won this game and the Patriots won their game, they play Baltimore. And they could use that same formula that they use against one mobile quarterback against Lamar Jackson if J.J. Watt comes back and wreaks havoc in the Bills game. So this game's going to be very intriguing to watch on both sides. But just seeing J.J. Watt come back, knowing what he's done for the community in Houston, knowing what he's done for the city, and knowing what he's doing for the team right now, even taking that potential chance to play for his guys, it just shows what kind of man J.J. Watt really is. It shows what kind of man that, just how everything is. He feels like everything he's doing is for the best and the betterment of his team, and you can't fault him for that. You cannot fault him for that at all. So, also this weekend, we have 2 quarterbacks that are making their first career start in the postseason. We're not going to talk about Carson Wentz here, even though he is making his first career start. He's on his own league. But 2 guys who, some people have some doubts about. Especially the guy I'm about to start with here, Ryan Tannehill. He played in Miami for multiple years. Never played a single playoff game with the Miami Dolphins. There was one playoff experience that the team made that he was on, but he got hurt and could not play in that game at the end of the season. And, he's came a long way. A lot of people thought like, oh, he's an average quarterback. He's Andy Dalton. And, some people could say Miami's structure wasn't the best. He never had the greatest offensive lines in the world. There wasn't always the greatest coaching. There was a lot of things that you could maybe say that held him back from being a better quarterback. Because you're seeing him with Tennessee now, and he's playing at a high level. He's playing at a level that, you sit here and he's like, I didn't see this in Miami at all. I didn't see him playing this well. And him coming out and leading Tennessee to the playoffs this year and winning so many games after the fact is just tremendous on his part. It's very tremendous on his part. And, Ryan Tannehill, like I said, he's had a long journey from Texas A&M. And him getting to his playoffs, I think already might give him a contract by Tennessee, but then also kind of steal the deal for him long term, because it's just like, maybe he could look at this and if he plays well, if he's able to come out with a victory against Brady, because he's beaten Tom Brady 4 times in his career, and they even have a statistic that no starting quarterback right now has more than I think in the playoffs, no quarterback in this playoffs has no more than 2 wins against Brady, I believe. And Ryan Tannehill has 4. Fitzpatrick has 3. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's not in the playoffs, he has 3. Ryan Tannehill has 4. So he's beaten Brady on 4 different occasions. So when he's played these guys, he's never backed down from that challenge. And you could say he's with his best team he's ever played with, going against these guys in a year that New England looks the most suspect. So it's going to be very exciting to see what he does this game against the New England Patriots, seeing if he can get over that hump, beat New England his first playoff game, and just silence all the haters and everybody who may have doubted him coming out of Miami, thinking he was a bust, thinking he wasn't good enough, thinking that he wasn't what a lot of people thought he could be, because, a lot of people thought this wasn't you're ever going to see this. So, but, it happens like that sometimes. So, but the other quarterback who's making his first start this week is Josh Allen. Josh Allen, this is his second year in the league. He, He's a guy that after his first year, some people had some questions about him. Some people wondered if he didn't look the best. You could see he was still raw. He was still very just he didn't look ready. He's like a project. But he always had the arm talent. He has a big arm. He's mobile. So really his best attribute wasn't even his throwing last year, it was his running. This year he's improved as a thrower. He obviously is still a threat on the ground and has really put his game together to create a more dangerous package for when teams play him. And I think this is what helps him gets over the hump. I think this is why Buffalo's had a great year, even with the fact that, defensively they're one of the best in the league. So a lot of the time he's always going to be able to win a game. And he has made some fourth quarter comebacks this year as well. So this isn't out of the realm of possibility for him to be able to come off and win a game. And to be able to come out and do what he has to do and get an upset against Deshaun Watson and Houston Texans. Because like I said, both of these quarterbacks are just trying to make a statement this weekend and show that they belong in these situations, they belong in the league, and they belong, where they are. This is a great start for both of them in their franchises' histories. Just to have a guy to come in there and play well. Obviously, Josh Allen much younger than Tannehill, but still both guys coming from similar paths. It's just Tannehill went through that path a little longer. But it's a very big opportunity for both of them this week in their playoff debuts. And you can hope for the best for both of them. Hope nobody gets hurt and they go out there and play as well as they played all year and show everybody why they deserve to be in the spot they've been in. But coming up next, we're going to talk about news and notes, more notes and news on the coaching carousel, firings, updates, other things like that coming up right here.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about news and notes coming out of playoff games and some storylines that also came from those playoff games. Now we're going to get more into some news and notes around the league, more especially the NFL carousel that's been going on with coaching. And we're going to get into some news out of Cleveland, John Dorsey being fired as the Cleveland general manager. This was a very interesting move. I believe this was a needed move. I feel like with what's happened this past year with Cleveland, you did need a clean house. You did need to change up that. You needed to make some new changes to the team. And I think clearing out that front office and clearing out the head coach was the best move. And kind of get a new direction in there who can kind of help the situation. Some people believe that a total reset is not only good for Cleveland, but also good for Baker Mayfield. To kind of get that new coaching staff in there, you got to think about it. First year, they say Hugh Jackson didn't believe in him, held him back. Second year, Freddie Kitchens was way over his head with all the talent with Baker. So you can maybe say his coaching and front office structure was not the best. And maybe they can say Baker's not built to handle dysfunction. But at the end of the day, he's in his third year coming in next year. He says he wants to be better. So it's important to bring in a head coach for Cleveland who can coach and who's an alpha male who can control the room. And also a GM who works with the coach, makes good selections on draft day and free agency, and make good money decisions and help this team get back to where they want to be, which is a successful team. I think that this firing, signals that. I feel like some people wondered. There was reports coming out that whoever they hired would have some say on the head GM, and they decided to go ahead and just part ways in general. Because, more than likely, how likely is it that a head coach is going to come in there and say, oh, we can keep the same general manager who's been part of the reason why this team's been failing for the last couple of years, and he should stay. That's just not something realistic I think you can think. And I think like I said, this was the best move that Cleveland could potentially make for them coming up in their franchise and just around the city of Cleveland, trying to give them some renewed confidence in the season. Obviously, some fans are going to be a little hesitant after being confident this past year and not having the greatest year or having the year they wanted. But still, at the same time, it's something that they can hang their hat on. They know they got some of the problems out of there. Now let's see if Cleveland can come up with some solutions, because solutions is what Cleveland's been looking for a long time. A lot of people thought Baker was going to be the savior. Now they're having questions about Baker. So it's going to be important to come out there and just, do what's best for the city and do what's best for the franchise and make things happen. In other coaching news, Ron Rivera signed a deal with the Washington Redskins, which I reported last time he was going to. But now we know it's a 5-year deal, which is a big commitment to a guy with Ron Rivera, who is an established coach. Some people wonder why Ron Rivera took this job, because they feel like, why would you want to go to the dysfunctional Redskins? The Redskins also fired Bruce Allen, who's been a part of the last decade of somewhat misery for Redskins fans and the team. And they were wondering, what does this mean? Why did Ron Rivera choose a team instead of waiting for maybe like at the Cowboys job or going to the Cleveland job? Why would he pick the Redskins job? Some people say that maybe this job is better. I believe that what you have with the Redskins with Ron Rivera is you have Dwayne Haskins. I think you can't give up on. I feel like you never want to do that, to give up on a quarterback because he had a bad first year, especially if you know the team's not that good. If you know the team's not that good, why give up on somebody? It's almost like you're saying, because you couldn't do anything with nothing, we don't think we gave you something, you're going to be able to do something. I know, because even some people thought Dwayne Haskins was a project. So you can't sit here and make it seem like, oh, this was the issue. But but also Dwayne Haskins, as far as we know, isn't Cam. So, and he's not as voiceful as Cam, so it's a little bit easier to control the environment there. Also, you have some talent. Redskins have some talent, guys. Terry McLaughlin, rookie wide receiver, he's played well. He looks like he could be a legitimate receiver for them for next years to come. Darius Guice played well. You still have Adrian Peterson still kicking. You have multiple guys. You have some players. You just got to build. The defense needs to improve a lot. I feel like Josh Norman needs to go. I feel like he hasn't played as well as he was signed to play. I believe that Ron Rivera is brought in here to establish a culture change, a culture shock to the Washington Redskins. He's going to provide a toughness. He's going to provide a gritty man who, when he walks in the room, he demands your attention and you listen to him. And if they could get the right players in here with them, I think this could really be a team. In the NFC East, listen, your best team was 9-7 and had a bunch of injuries. Honestly, it almost looked like maybe the team wasn't even going to finish above 500, or no team's going to finish above 500 in the NFC East. So the NFC East isn't as, I would say, it's not like the AFC East where it's like New England and everybody else by far. It's kind of one of those things where the Redskins are last in terms of rosters, but if you can put the right pieces together, why wouldn't they be able to compete next year with all these teams? Now, obviously, the Eagles are going to be much more healthier, so we don't know what they're going to look at full strength. The Cowboys, we have no idea what they're going to look like next year at all. They have the talent, but we don't know what's going to happen at coach. The Giants have talent. We also just have to see what happens at coach there. And, there's just a lot more questions with a lot of teams than, okay, this team's going to be good every year forever, like the New England Patriots and the AFC East. So I think that it gives Washington the ability to be good faster. If it's not next year, then the next under Ron. If you're giving the man 5 years, unless y'all just had a terrible, terrible couple of years coming up, they seem like they're willing to stick this out with him. I feel like at best they'll give him 3 years, because they'll have 2 years left. And if he can get even one good year out of him, maybe they may keep him for that 4th year and going into that 5th year. So I think this was a great selection, though, when they did go with Ron Rivera as the head coach. And, just I think it's important to establish, that culture that everybody wants to have in their franchise. Another story, the Jags decided to keep Doug Marrone. And that was a very interesting decision. They're keeping Doug Marrone, but they fired Tom Coughlin. Now, if you look at the team, they kind of seem like they quit on Doug Marrone at the end of the year. They kind of did. Now, they won the Colts game, and even in the Falcons game, they played slightly better when they switched back to Gardner Minshew. Maybe Gardner Minshew is the key to this entire equation that, hey, if you make him the starter and the Jacksonville Jaguars get more talent, then everything is great, and Doug, this is a great decision. But at the same time, this could easily backfire. You got to see what the locker room temperature is like with him. Do the players want to play for him? Do the players like him? Do the players care for him? If they don't, and you tell them, oh, he's coming back, then the Jacksonville Jaguars will be right where they were this year. Bad record, which is not what you want. Jacksonville was built on defense, and their defense was one of the worst units this year. Honestly, like I said, second half of the season, they were just like whatever. It just inconsistent play. They traded Jalen Ramsey. That was very big, trading Jalen Ramsey. That's probably one of the reasons why the locker room has some division there, because Jalen Ramsey was very well liked. He was their best defensive player, and the head coach got into it, and he's like, okay, we're going to trade you. Well, you trade away our best player right in the middle of us trying to fight for a playoff spot. That's not really the greatest view on you, coach. And then, just things that happened. I don't know if they think maybe, the Falcons gave Dan Quinn another chance, so why can't Doug Marrone get another chance? Because they both had teams that had success almost the same year and all that. And I was just like, and I kind of thought to myself, I was just like, I really hope that the Falcons keep Dan Quinn ain't making coaches feel like, oh, let's keep Doug around, because if he can get a third chance, then Doug can get a third chance. Because the only problem with that is if you make this decision and the team doesn't get better, you look very bad in the front office. Very bad. But coming up next, we're going to talk about why the Dallas Cowboys haven't fired Jason Garrett yet. And also, what are the best coaching jobs available right now in the NFL?
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about news and updates around the league when it came to coaching around the league. There's a couple of changes we talked about. Obviously, John Dorsey being fired, what that means for the Cleveland franchise and organization. We also talked about the Jags keeping Doug Marrone, why maybe they kept Doug Marrone, maybe a factor coming from when Atlanta kept Dan Quinn. And also Ron Rivera signing a 5-year deal with the Washington Redskins to be their football head coach, and what that means for Washington moving forward. So now we're going to get into the big coaching debate, and the big coaching topic in all of the news is Dallas Cowboys Jason Garrett. He, as of right now, is still his contract expired, but he's still basically, the guy, the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of people are wondering what's taking so long. Why haven't they pulled the trigger? Why haven't they fired him yet? I feel like that it's something that it's a big question. I understand why that question is being asked. I think the question, is more. I just think it's tough. The Dallas Cowboys are more of a family-ran type of organization and franchise. And Jason Garrett's been a loyal soldier for 10 years. And it's hard making that cut. It's hard making that separation because of everything he's done for the franchise, everything he's done for the Joneses. And I can understand it being tough, but I do still feel like at the end of the day they will let him go. It's taking a while. They've had 2 meetings already. And the decision has not been made. A decision will be made Thursday evening, I believe. And they will and they will announce, I feel like, if he's staying or they're going to renew Jason Garrett. Some people think the longer this takes, the more that this may put in the favor of Jason Garrett to potentially stay as the Dallas Cowboy head coach. Some people think they're hesitating to fire him, but they know they gotta fire him. It's one of those things where, I feel like everybody's ready for him to leave Dallas. I think the players want change. I really do. I think the players want change. I think, obviously, the fans want change. Every fan that's not even a Dallas Cowboy fan thinks the Cowboys, if they even want to be good, so the Cowboy fans can talk all the stuff they want to talk, they have to make a change. Because as long as Jason Garrett's the main guy, that expectation of a Super Bowl is not coming off as realistic. It's not coming off as something that can happen, especially after a year like this where they were favored in 15 games and they finished 8-8. And they beat up on the bad teams. They lost to the good ones. And so with the talent they have, they completely underachieved. And it was very disappointing to watch the underachievements of the Dallas Cowboys. So that's why, that decision to let go of Jason Garrett, whenever that does actually come official, is the best decision and the right decision at the end of the day, because you got to think about the franchise. You got to think about what's best for everybody. You have to think about what's going to get everybody in the right direction. And if you don't make the changes necessary, then you may be stuck with another year of mediocrity, which Dallas Cowboy fans definitely do not want to hear. They do not want to be stuck with mediocrity. They do not want to be stuck with the same old, same old. They want to know what they're doing is going to get them where they want to go, which is to the playoffs, and that's what they want to do. They want to make sure they're going to get to the playoffs, and not only just get to the playoffs, but be able to compete for the Super Bowl and be able to win the NFC East yearly. Because like I said, this year was one of the best years to win the NFC East with, the Eagles being banged up. They could have had this NFC East wrapped up if they beat the Eagles in Week 16, and they couldn't get the job done. They played one of their worstest games of the season in that game. And a lot of that is attributed to Jason Garrett, which is why a lot of people feel like it is time for him to walk. It is time for him to go. And it is time for him to find a new job. And maybe, you never know, maybe they may come to a resolution and they may hire him back. But not as the head coach, but just in a different position, so he can stay with the family, with the staff, and be a part of, Dallas Cowboy future. So that's all I have on that one. But we're going to talk about now some of the best job openings that are open, and we're going to talk about which job is the best. And we're going to start with the Giants job. I think the Giants job, to me, is the best job available, because you have you kind of know what you're dealing with when it comes to the Giants. Defensively is where their issues are. They're not the best defensive team. They have some issues almost on every part. They have issues almost on every part of the team on defense. Secondary, linebackers, defensive line, even though they do have an elite pass rusher. They have the offensive weapons. You have a young quarterback, Daniel Jones, you can build a franchise around. You have Saquon Barkley, one of the best young up-and-coming running backs in the league. They don't have a true number one, but they have a good receiver. Sterling Shepard is not a slouch. Golden Tate's one of the best slots. And Darius Slayton came on with some big plays down the stretch too. And then you have Smith, who's not a bad tight end, and Evan Ingram, who, when he finally has a healthy year, has all the talent in the world to be one of the best tight ends. So there's a lot of potential with, the Giants. I feel like they just have a lot of potential to potentially be one of the best teams in the NFL if you could just fix the defensive side of the ball. If you can fix that, then I think the Giants will be right back in the NFC. Like, NFC is really, you look at all these teams, you just make these changes that are necessary, and they really could be right back into the fold next year. So that's why I think that's the best job. The second best job, I think, is the Cleveland job. Same thing, really. It depends on the quarterback position. Just depends on the coach. It depends on what you think of Baker Mayfield. If you think it's bad coaching and bad offensive line, so he doesn't have the best chance to succeed, so if I give him this, he'll be able to succeed, then you're straight. If you feel like that he just in general is not a good quarterback, then that could obviously change things too. But they also have some of the best skill position groups in the league. They have one of the best running back groups with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. If all the receivers stayed, you can't look. That talent wise, they are one of the best receiving groups in the entire NFL. And when David Njoku comes back and is fully healthy, he's one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Really, offensively, their weakness is offensive line. And even on defense, they have one of the best D-lines in the NFL. They have one of the best defensive lines that are in the league. And, I think that shows a lot because Cleveland has guys. It just didn't click this year. It just didn't happen this year. And I think that's why it's important to kind of get that fixed, because you want to come into this game and you want to just when you look for a job as an NFL coach, you want to figure out which roster is the closest to being good, where I may have to just make a couple of changes here and there to then create the ability to be a winner here. And then the third best job I think there is the Panthers job, because defensively you have talent. You have Luke Kuechly. Offensively, you got to find you a quarterback. Obviously, highly likely that whoever comes in, unless they love Cam, is going to stay with Cam. So you got to find you a quarterback. You got Christian McCaffrey, one of the best running backs in the league. DJ Moore is one of the best wide receivers. So you got some weapons. Defensively, you got to make some changes. Getting a little older in a couple of spots. Got to make some adjustments there. But overall, there's changes that can be made. There's changes that can happen, and they can definitely help and progress the team moving forward with these changes with the Carolina Panthers. I think that also they have a good front staff, great ownership. So it's just a matter of got to solve the quarterback position and upgrade some positions and manage some cap room on the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers could be right back in it next year. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the New Year's 6 bowl games, and we're also going to talk about the preview of the national championship in a couple of weeks.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Football Podcast. Now we're going to switch into some college football. The last segment we did talk about the reasons why they maybe haven't fired Jason Garrett yet, and also what's the best job. I listed my 3 best jobs I think that are available in the market for head coaches. If anybody hires these jobs, I think these are the best jobs to potentially have the most success in your first or second year, potentially coming off of a pretty good, bad season for all these teams. But so now we're going to get some college football talk. We're going to talk about some of the New Year games. We're going to get my thoughts on those games and the scores. And the first game we're going to talk about here is the one that happened right before New Year's Eve. Florida and Virginia. Florida won 36-28. This game was pretty much. It was interesting. Some people consider this game not one of the best games that was played this past weekend. I think the game was fine. Virginia came into this game, down a lot of cornerbacks and, got a quarterback who's kind of more of a runner than a thrower at quarterback. And Florida was projected to win this game. But the thing about it is Florida was projected to blow Virginia out. And Virginia didn't make it a game. And I think you got to give Virginia credit for that, for making a game against an SEC team like the Florida Gators. Because, Florida's trying, build some momentum for next year and maybe make a run at it, especially with Georgia not knowing what Georgia's going to be like next year. With potentially Fromm leaving, Swift leaving, you don't know what this team's going to be next year. So I think Florida needed this game for momentum going into next year. These bowl games are still important when it comes to momentum moving forward because of the fact that you don't know what this can do for a team. The confidence, for a team coming off a win like this, even regardless of who the opponent is, this was a big win for Florida. Now we're going to actually talk about the New Year's games themselves. First game we're going to talk about is the Outback Bowl, Minnesota and Auburn. Minnesota won 31-24. This was a big game for the Minnesota program. This is probably one of the biggest wins in program history, too, because beating an SEC Auburn team who beat Alabama this year, it was a game that was a little bit sloppily played, but both teams put their best foot out there. And, the Golden Gophers were basically just able to jump on Auburn early in the game. They were up 24-17 after 2 quarters, and, they were just able to hold on to the lead after that pretty much. The second half was more of a defensive game. But like I said, this is a big win for them. And, listen, Minnesota had a chance to potentially make the college football playoff if they can win out. Lost a couple of games, lost to Iowa, lost a couple of games. But, I feel like they've had a great season for what they've accomplished. Everything that they've done, they should not look down upon. Beating an Auburn team is definitely an accomplishment. It's kind of funny because it's always looked at as beating Auburn in a bowl game is an accomplishment because they're always that 3rd best team in the SEC every year. Now they're the 4th, but usually they're the 3rd. And remember a couple of years ago with I think Jarrett Stidham was still at quarterback and they went against UCF that year. UCF felt like, we are the national champions because they beat the team that beat both Alabama and Georgia who played in the national championship. That was a big win for them. And this is a big win for Minnesota because, like I said, Minnesota's never been looked at as a football program that is looked at that competes against powerhouses. Even though they play in a big conference that has a powerhouse like Ohio State and Michigan, they've never been looked at as that team. They're kind of looked at as maybe kind of the Vanderbilt, of the Big Ten. Maybe not that low, but just they're not looked at as highly. They're not looked at as a team that you think, they're going to come in here and beat the big dogs year in and year out. And we don't know what Minnesota's going to look like next year. We don't know how good they're going to be next year, but you can never sleep on a team with the fight of Minnesota because they're always going to come out there and play their hardest every game to try to win because they know that, we're the underdogs, especially in these games, and we want to prove to people that we're not as low and beneath as people think we are. We actually are one of the best, if not one of the best teams that play in this game. So, it's a big win for them. It's a big win for them. And the next game we're going to talk about is Alabama-Michigan. Alabama pretty much dominated this game from the get-go. They got 3-0 in Michigan early and then got a touchdown. That was pretty much this game. Michigan, after that, Michigan in the first quarter played well. It was able to get a 10-3 lead, but just in the first half was competitive too. But outside of that, second half, they were completely shut down. And it just, Alabama, did what they had to do out there with Matt Jones at quarterback. We're wondering about if Tua's going to come back. He's supposed to make his decision on January 6th if he's going to the NFL or not. A couple of Alabama guys have came back, which makes you kind of wonder a little bit if maybe there's one last hurrah, or our chance to prove that we're not as what the record says we should have made in the playoff. But Alabama just came out here and handled business after that first half. It's funny because they were talking about Shea Patterson did not play the best in this game, and people forget that Shea Patterson at Ole Miss was actually one of the most one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC at that time. He was, with that system that Ole Miss had, he really played very well. I feel like when he came to Michigan, they changed the offense. They played a different system, which was not to his skill set. Then they tried to change it again to fit him better. And he played slightly better, but he just never was that same guy that we saw at Ole Miss. And I think, obviously Alabama exposed that. And, people were wondering about Jim Harbaugh. Is there a potential chance that maybe he could get fired or whatever, because like I said, offensively, they're still struggling. I mean, this game against Alabama, they really struggled to make plays when they needed to, and it kind of just showed. It really showed, and I think that if you're Alabama, you definitely can. Even though they probably don't look at this as a game that can build us into next year, they're just going to be like, well, you know what, we're going to let LSU, Clemson have their little fun, but next year we're going to come back and we're coming for that crown. We're coming to prove that we are still one of the best teams in the SEC, and we are one of the best teams in the conference, and people definitely should not sleep on them. They are going to come back and compete at a very high level next year. I truly believe that, because Alabama's going to be good every year as long as Nick Saban is there. Especially, like I said, if Tua comes back, especially. Even Matt Jones. they're still explosive without him. Obviously they might lose a couple of receivers, but Alabama always reloads. They always have 5-star recruits waiting in the wings, waiting to get their play time, hungry for play time. With the amazing coaching of Nick Saban, you never count Alabama out. In the Rose Bowl game, Oregon and Wisconsin, this is one of the best games that I've seen played. This game came down to the last seconds. Justin Herbert took the lead in the fourth quarter. There was one missed call in the game where there was a offensive pass interference on Wisconsin that would have given them the first down. Some people think maybe there wasn't a pass interference there. Some people do. It just depends on how you view the play and when you look at the play itself, and just depends on how you look at potentially if maybe they have a point there. It's one of those things where Justin Herbert's been criticized a lot, maybe not reaching the expectations that he could have reached with the talent that he has and possesses. And winning this Wisconsin game was very big for him. I think just winning this game was important for him to have that momentum. He came back for his senior year to be in a bigger game, to play better for this team, and even improve his draft stock. And, coming back and winning the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, one of the best Big Ten teams that have to offer, was big for him in everything that they do and stand for out there in Oregon. They finished 12-2 in the year. They had a chance to football playoff, but, that loss to Arizona State really messed them up, because we can make an argument right now, if they had never lost to Arizona State, they would have made it to the college football playoff. And, maybe we still think LSU would beat them, but you don't know if maybe Oregon could have put up a better fight than Oklahoma. But maybe this was the right game for him to play in, just because if there was a disaster in that game, maybe he would look as good. It could hurt his draft stock. The team won't look as good. Or him winning this game might actually potentially help him in the future going long term. And then the last game of the big New Year's 6 games is Georgia and Baylor. Georgia won 26-14. Jake Fromm had one of his best games of the year. I think that's extremely great for him, because he did what he had to do out there. Pickens was a beast. He'll be probably the number one receiver, AJ Green type for the next few years, probably next 2 years. If he ends up at this rate, he'll probably be a first-round wide receiver. They had great chemistry, because that's the only wide receiver it seems like he trusts out there, but this is a big win for them. The defense played very tenacious right here against Baylor. Baylor had a hard time moving the ball offensively against Georgia, and, we'll have to see what happens. Like I said, you don't know if Fromm's going to leave, Swift's gone, some of those receivers that haven't played, they're going to be gone. You're going to have to see how this team looks, offensive line shuffle. We'll have to see what Georgia looks like next year. And then a quick little preview on the college football playoff national championship. I'll get more in depth in next week's show. I look at the game and I think that right now for me, if I had to choose today, I'm going to lean more LSU because of the offense. Because the key to this game is going to be Clemson. Can they stop LSU on offense? Like, can Clemson's defense make enough plays to potentially win? That's going to be what the key is in this game if they want to come out with a victory and they want to come out with a win and they want to come out just playing at a great, a great time. And this is I very highly anticipate this game. I think this game is going to be one of the best games of, all national championships. You have two dominant teams, LSU looking like the new team on the block, and Clemson defending their national championship. It's great that they're able to defend it, because people were questioning them with the schedule they had all year if they even should be here right now, and they've proved it. And they proved it against Ohio State, one of the best teams in the nation. But coming up next, I'm going to give my predictions on the wild card games and the reason why I think these teams will win this weekend in the NFL playoffs. Stay tuned.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we talked about the college football New Year games, the results on those, my thoughts. Also, we talked a little preview, just a small little preview of the college football national championship game that's coming up here in a couple of weeks. But now we're going to go back into some NFL football. Now I'm going to give you my predictions and why I think that these games are going to go this way for the wild card games this weekend here on the podcast. First game we're going to get into here, we're going to get into Bills-Texans, as this is the first game that will be played this weekend. It'll be on ABC, ESPN, 4:35, Bills-Texans. Obviously, Texans are hosting the Buffalo Bills. This is one of the most underrated, advertised games in the playoff this week. There's not a lot of major storylines unless you hear about J.J. Watt coming into this game. Both, like I said, Josh Allen is making his first playoff start this week. And, he's going to come into this game and he's going to have to play one of the best in the game right now in Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's a young, great quarterback with DeAndre Hopkins on the outside and the Texans being able to find a running game. This game's going to be it's going to come down to this to me, where I feel like it's going to come down to who can make the most stops. Obviously, Buffalo is the better defense, but they're going against the better offense. So who's going to get the most stops, really? Is getting Houston's defense, which is their liability, especially in the secondary, stop Josh Allen. Now, they have the blueprint, because if J.J. Watt comes back and be the J.J. Watt we know, they should be able to get pressure with Merciless on the other end, being able to come after the passer. So if they can keep Josh Allen in that pocket, you should be able to do something. Remember, Buffalo doesn't have any wide receiving weapons that are just scares you. The best receiver probably is John Brown, which, again, that's not a bad option, but John Brown is not, by people's standards, a number one receiver. He is maybe a good number two, just slot receiver, and he's had to be the number one for them this year. But they've thought of ways to win with this offense because they use everybody. They run the ball, they use tight ends, they use wide receivers. So if I'm going to go with a prediction in this game, though, I feel like I'm going to go with the Houston Texans here. I think Houston, they've struggled in a couple of playoff games they've been in with Deshaun Watson. I think they're going to get over the hump and win this year, which would help them, just in terms of the credibility. Because, if Deshaun Watson loses this game, there might be those questions of can he win a playoff game, because he was big in college football in big moments. Now people want to see it here in the NFL. Can he be just as big? Can he be just as clutch in the same moments that he was maybe going against those Alabama Roll Tide teams back in college, where he really made a name for himself? And then the later game of Saturday that night, 8:15 CBS, Titans and Patriots. This is obviously the game that everybody has a lot of interest in because of how New England has played. Is this potentially Tom Brady's last year being New England's quarterback? Is this potentially, the end of a dynasty? And it's funny because people are feeling it more here just because if they do lose to Tennessee, you just feel like, man, what's next for them? What can they do next? What's going to happen to this team? And it's just going to be very interesting how this game goes. Tennessee's coming in here. They really have no pressure. I mean, they made the playoffs. They haven't made it in years. Brian Tannehill probably going to give him a contract extension this offseason. But they have the talent to win this game. They have one of the better offenses in the league. They can score points. They can score some points. So, and that's going to be the key to this game because since the Patriots have struggled offensively, if the Titans are able to move the ball on their defense, can the Patriots keep up? Now, the only thing they have in their advantage is that Tennessee's back end really isn't the best. So if Julian Edelman and James White can make some plays and they can get a couple of plays from, Henry and Sanu, they could win this game. That's why a lot of people feel like they like some people are taking the Patriots almost like, I'll take them to win, and that's how I think a lot of people feel, because it's the Patriots. You never want to count them out, but it's like it's hard not to believe that maybe this year's just not going to happen for them. This year they're not going to be able to pull it out. This year they're not going to be able to do what they've been able to do in previous years and win this game. And that's going to be like the biggest thing I think that they have to answer. Because even if they win this game, a lot of people don't see them winning 2 road games, beating Kansas City, and then beating Baltimore. If everybody won, they would have to go to Kansas City next round, and then they'd have to go to the Baltimore Ravens. And everybody just feels like, from an offensive perspective, they can't score with those teams. So unless the New England defense has very historical performances this playoff run, a lot of people just don't see that potential of them winning these games and coming back with a win, and that's going to be really that's what's going to be key here for the New England Patriots going long term into the future. Just what's next for this team. But if I'm giving my prediction in this game, I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans. I think they're going to beat the New England Patriots in Foxborough. I think they're going to come in there. I think they're going to run the ball with Derrick Henry. I think they're going to do ball control, and I think Ryan Tannehill's going to make a couple of touchdown throws to A.J. Brown. And I just feel like if Titans can hit 28 points or higher, that should be good enough to beat New England. I definitely feel like if they can hit that point range, that should be enough to beat the New England Patriots in this game. So the next game I'm going to talk about here is the 105 Fox Sunday game, Vikings and Saints. Obviously, this game, I think a lot of Saints fans might have this game kind of circled a little bit because of what happened last time these teams might have played. These teams played last time in the playoffs where there was the Minneapolis Miracle with Deshaun Diggs and Case Keenum. The only difference really is that Dalvin Cook's in this game and Kirk Cousins is the quarterback. Now, everything on paper says Saints should destroy the Vikings because of Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins does not play well in these spots. But you don't know. With Dalvin Cook being cleared to play and going to play in this game, if Dalvin Cook can make some big runs and keep some ball control for the Minnesota Vikings, and they get touchdowns and not field goals in that dome in New Orleans, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to beat the Saints, in my opinion. I just don't see why they wouldn't be able to pull it off. But I'm going to go with the Saints here. That's just my selection. I think the Saints are going to win this game. I just feel like the Saints are playing at a high level in offense and defense, and I just feel like, especially with Janoris Jenkins being added to that secondary, I feel like they should. I mean, they really match up well with Minnesota. You got Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen going against Janoris Jenkins and Marshawn Lattimore. That's a pretty good matchup. You have guys who can match up with those guys. So it's going to really be on Kirk Cousins to show us, can he be the quarterback that everybody thinks he can't be? Basically, can he just have one of those big games? He's kind of the Blake Bortles of this playoff. Remember Blake Bortles enters the playoffs and everybody's like, it's Blake Bortles. He's not going to do that well. He's going to struggle. He struggled all year. He's not going to do anything. And then he actually played very well in the playoffs. Kirk Cousins has to be like that. He has to win in that regard. And the last game is the last game of the wildcard weekend is Seattle and Philadelphia. This game is a game where the Eagles willed their way into the playoffs with Carson Wentz carrying them with all the injuries into this game. I think this game, if they get some guys back for this game like Miles Sanders and Ertz, they have a chance to beat Seattle. Now, we would think Seattle would win the game, but there's a chance here that the Eagles can pull off this victory and beat these guys, which will help them in the long term because it'll help them be able to, stay on top. And I believe, Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. In this matchup, I would take Russell Wilson. But something about the Eagles and their resiliency just makes you kind of like, I don't want to just assume that they can't do it. They can't pull off the victory. So you're kind of in this spot where it's like, if I go with the Eagles, I know what team I'm getting. But if I go with the Seattle Seahawks, am I underestimating the Eagles? for me, I'm going to go with the Eagles. I think the Eagles are going to upset Minnesota with the Seattle Seahawks, and I think they're going to go on to the next round, which will be big because then they might get a couple more guys back like Deshaun Jackson. So I'm projecting to win this game. I think if the Eagles win, it needs to be a relatively mid-scoring game. If it gets high scoring, then Seattle is going to win this game. But if they can keep it mid-scoring, 24 points at max, I think they can make enough plays on the defensive end to be able to come out with this game with a victory and win it. But that's all for me today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a review. That really helps us. Also, if you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, thank you and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.